The views and opinions expressed by guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of Forge Fitness and Nutrition LLC, the podcast hosts, owners, employees, contractors, partners, or affiliates. This presentation may include the use of explicit language. Listener or viewer discretion is advised. Welcome to the Forge podcast, where we break down the truth about fitness, nutrition, and personal transformation. Today, I am so pleased to be joined by Chrissy Zmijewski. Chrissy is a World Natural Bodybuilding Federation champion. She's an educator, she's a coach, and someone who went from dominating the figure stage to continually remaking herself despite setbacks, injuries, the reality of aging, all of these things in the athlete's frame and as an incredible human being. I'm so excited that you all get a chance to get to know her. But I wanted to mention that this conversation is not about looking incredible and maximizing your potential competitively necessarily. It's about lifting up your life. It's about becoming the best version of yourself that you can possibly become, and understanding that fitness, nutrition, and habit takes time. It takes energy. It takes effort. And her expertise is going to definitely give you some really good insight so that you can start to formulate and navigate your own life so that you can create an outcome that is based on what you believe is valuable for yourself. You take back your fitness. And I think origin stories are cool. And so, Chrissy, take us back to what got you into bodybuilding and this physique competition.
Well, I've always been an athlete for as long as I can remember, regardless of the sport. Swimming, soccer, softball, volleyball was my sport for a long time. And I played it competitively all the way through grad school. And then after grad school, it was, it's hard as you get into the working world, being a competitive athlete and making time for team practices. And so I was kind of missing that aspect. I've always done weightlifting, but I got into that more. I did yoga. And then I got married and we moved to Hawaii. And, the avocados are this big, and we had a tree on our property that we worked at. And so I was eating lots of avocados, lots of macadamia nuts, and gained quite a bit of weight. I mean, when you're kind of a beach bum, it's like you're wearing sarongs and bikinis. It's easy to gain weight and be like, yeah, my clothes still fit me. I gained a bunch of weight, and I walked into a bookstore and saw Oxygen magazine, and they had all the figure competitors up there. And I was like, and I know that a lot of them, it was the organization where they use drugs. And I was like, okay, that's my next goal. I'm going to get up on stage. I'm going to be natural, not use drugs. And I'm going to beat those girls. And so my husband's like, okay, cool. He's very supportive. He's like, okay, what's your time frame? And I was like, 3 months. And he's like, I don't practice what I preach. I don't set goals like I tell my clients to. And so that was my journey. That's where I started. And we lived out in the middle of nowhere in Hawaii. And so we didn't have a car. So I'd have to hitchhike into town every day to go to 24-hour fitness and work out. And that started my bodybuilding journey.
I love that story. Obviously, I've heard it before because I've known you since 2007. I think I was starting as a consultant to the program advisory committee at Bryan University back in I think it was 2007. And so I've heard all these great stories, and it's just so fun to share them with everyone else because your journey has been really interesting. And of course, your husband, Dr. B, what are you going to do? I mean, he's his own force of nature. But coming back to you, you competed at the very highest natural level. And you did it in a very short amount of time. I knew the story about the time frame. I didn't know it was Oxygen magazine that was your catalyst for, where you saw it. You said, oh, well, I could do that. But I knew it was an obnoxiously short window of time where you just fundamentally transformed. And I don't think people understand that isn't about your physical capacity. It's about your mental capacity. What do you think separated you from everyone else? Because that's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, well, it did take me, so I did get on stage in 3 months. It did take me 6 years to win my first national or my first world title, but I did get my pro card. I think it was within 3 years of even starting competing. And I was, starting from nothing, being a beach bum. I mean, I swam with turtles in the ocean, but that was about it. But I believe our biggest strength is also sometimes our biggest weakness. And me is doubting myself. And while that works against you a lot, it helped me because I never assumed that I was going to be the winner. Even when I was on podcasts and they were like, okay, you're going into this competition, you're the one to beat. I never assumed that. I mean, it's a subjective sport. It's like, some people prefer more muscular women. Some people prefer leaner, less lean, all that stuff. So you walk in, you don't know who the judging panel is. You don't know what they're, that we have general categories and general criteria, but everyone interprets that differently. And so I went in never assuming I was the winner, which meant I always had to give it my 100% best because I never know who was going to show up that day. It's like if you play other sports, it's like you kind of know who your competition is, what they've been doing that year. And it's like I never knew. You would go in blind. So I always went in going, I have to prove myself and make sure that I put in all the effort I need to so that I can show my best.
Seems to me there's an interesting humility that comes with that kind of a mindset. Really,
For sure.
if you think about it, when I say the word ego, I mean it in its most basic psychological sense. I don't mean it in its perverted sense in social media where everyone's like, oh, this person has an ego. I don't mean it that way. Ego is part of how we reconcile within ourselves. And I find this fascinating because you basically said, I may not be the best, but I'm going to do everything that I possibly can to be the best without even knowing who was doing what. Here's what I've always found how you presented yourself. You had grace. It wasn't just an aesthetic. It was the way that you actually presented yourself, not only in photographs, but even in person. And there's a poise, there's a chest up, shoulders back. There's a retraction and depression of the shoulder. There's this calm and a centeredness that you bring that I find it to be part of that aesthetic allure that you provide. But I'm curious, what, aside from my praise for that, what did you find that competing taught you that normal just fitness training just couldn't quite do?
Sure. Well, so even like you said, the poise, I had to practice that. I am barefoot most of the time or in flat shoes, and I had to get on stage and flex my muscles in high heels that were 5 inches. Like I'm already 5'10", so like I'm towering over 6 foot and having to be graceful walking in a tiny bikini on stage. So you make yourself very vulnerable, and it's what I love and hate about very competitive endeavors, whether it be fitness, art, whatever. You're putting yourself out there, you're making yourself vulnerable, and you expose your weaknesses. And it's like, it's one thing to train. I know that I've seen videos of you doing some martial art type stuff, and it's one thing to train and do the form. And it's another thing to have a competitor, right? You might think you know the form, you might think you're doing the right things, but until you have a competitor, you don't know all of your weaknesses. But it also taught me to develop thick skin because in one competition, a judge told me, I talked to him to get some feedback, and he's like, well, your forehead's a little big. And I was like, that's what you're docking me down for, is my forehead being big? Okay. And so it was just like, it's one of those things that you just have to, it was very frustrating in the moment because I was like, that's why I get maybe, the beauty aspect of it, like maybe have bangs or something, cover up your huge forehead. I don't know. But it was one of those things that was just like, okay, I can't take this too seriously. Right. And I think that in whatever we do, it's like we take it too seriously. We make it, that's our identity. And if we fail, then we're failures. And it was really a good opportunity to go, this is where I can improve. But just because I didn't get my goal doesn't mean that that's a reflection of who I am as a person. And that's hard because I am a perfectionist. I want to win everything. I want to do everything perfectly. And so it was an opportunity for me to be tested in that.
I believe that most people would want to hear the perspective of somebody who has competed at your level and won, somebody who's been considered the best, and still you have detractors. Number one, and something's fucking wrong. Your forehead's too big. There's always somebody who's going to be negative and bring you down, because I say this all the time. Construction is hard. Destruction is easy. I would just say the folks who struggle with maybe a form of dysmorphia, or people who are working hard and there's something that they can't control. For example, you can't control height. You can't control the size of your forehead. There are things that we don't control. Can you help people navigate that really briefly? What was the internal dialogue that you had that was allowing you to put that aside and continue to elevate yourself without that detraction becoming an anchor?
Well, that's a good question. My husband was helpful in telling me that guy's a moron. So it's just like, it's like yeah. So that was super helpful. And, I can't say that it didn't affect me in the moment, but the more I went through this, and I actually quit bodybuilding a couple of times and went to track and field, master's track and field, because if you cross the finish line, you're first. If you have a big forehead or not, doesn't matter. It's like the winner is the winner, and it's very black and white. And I was in a sport that was very gray, which is good for me because I like black and white. I don't like gray. So being in that kind of sport was helpful for me because it really allowed me to work not just physically on my body, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually, whatever, about not attaching to the outcome. And it's so easy for us to do, is to attach to the outcome. I didn't place first. Well, guess what? Only one person places first. Everyone else is the loser. So if that's your only goal, is to place first, then you're always going to be disappointed. And so for people who have body dysmorphia, I can tell you people who looked amazing, amazing, even better than I did. And they're miserable people. And it's so, it's like I've had some clients that are like, I just want to lose 20 pounds, then I'll be happy. No, you won't. You'll be 20 pounds lighter and you'll still not enjoy life. And that's why my tagline when I did a lot of coaching was define yourself. And it's not like, the definition was obviously a play on words for competing, but it was also, who are you? What makes you tick, Michael? What makes you happy? Because the lowering your body percentage, fat percentage, gaining muscle, having what you feel is the ideal physique, that doesn't mean you're going to be happy. And so that was really crucial for me too, being someone who's very black and white, to go, okay, what does defining me look like outside of just being up on stage and getting these trophies? And it was really about inspiring other people, because when we're around happy people, like, we're happier, right? You can't help but have that be a little bit infectious. And so part of, my coaching was selfish. I wanted to create a community of healthy, happy people so that I could be around those people.
Selfishness comes in degrees. And after a certain threshold, that self-centeredness can become destructive. However, a selfishness that is centered around well, I would say it was the intrinsic inclusion of other people to your cause in a positive, proactive way. It's a power of magnetism that creates an attraction. And I think that people sometimes are so careful to not be selfish. This is all, of course, fake, because most people are inherently selfish, but creating an environment in which you can thrive and inviting other people into it so that they can also improve is actually more altruistic than it is selfish, in my estimation. And I find that is just a great story. And, you and I both have, you to a professional degree, with world titles, have worked on their physiques over the years. And I'm just like you, I'm to the point now where I've changed how I'm approaching my own personal well-being. And I wanted to mention this because you had said something, but it comes down to, who do I want to be and what does my fitness really mean? And it's not so much about an aesthetic outcome as it used to be when I was younger. I think that was partially because there was the pressure in the gym industry. I tend to be a little bit more ectomorphic. I don't submit to somatotypes, but I'm just saying that I'm kind of a tall, lanky guy. And for me to build and maintain lean muscle is a challenge. I'm doing it better than I ever have, mostly because I'm not focusing on it in the same way that I used to. I've removed the obsession and I've turned it into more of a fun, joyful experience versus it being a response to an industry that told me that I didn't know what I was talking about because I didn't have 25-inch biceps. See what I mean?
Yep.
It was very difficult. I found that to be a very hard thing for me to navigate through my entire career, being kind of a leaner guy. No, I was usually stronger than most people in my own way, right? My force production was pretty high, but that's because of a training algorithm that had been set for years and years and years. So now I'm 46. So there's been a little bit of a dip, but I'm accepting it. This is a really important thing for people to consider, is that, where you are now is only an indicator of where you could be, but you have to also be realistic about what is that going to take? And is that really what you want? Is that really what you want? And discovering that and then being okay with it sometimes means that you step away. For example, you moved into the track and field world again, but I'd heard this story about how you were one hell of a track and field athlete as well. It might have been your husband who was bragging about that. But anyway, there was somebody at the university who had said, oh, she's really fast. She's really quite the athlete in that regard too, which doesn't surprise me at all. Anybody who knows you for more than 5 minutes has the understanding that you're a woman of excellence. So I would suspect that would be the case. But as a quick transition though, back to, and we were talking about the performance training mindset and, how you kind of had to get through all of that. But I wanted to ask you a little bit about nutrition, because that is something that people always are like, well, what do you eat? What do you eat? Like, what, I feel like it's a relevant question, but I think that social media and the mainstream fitness delusions have perverted what nutrition really is for people, or what they perceive that it is. I think you and I probably have a pretty similar take on nutrition, but I wanted to have you explore that with us a little bit. I know nutrition is just really something that derails most people's progress because they overcomplicate it or they oversimplify it through fads. But what did your nutrition look like at your peak?
I get the blessing of having lots of digestive issues. So my nutrition often circled around which stress does not help, dieting does not help, over exercising does not help. So like take bad to worse. Nutrition often looked like whatever my body was tolerating at the time. And I tried all the fad diets to help with digestive issues, and not being a stress definitely helps. But it was mostly unprocessed, regardless of what year it was, how much, what my fat, protein, carbohydrate intake was. It was always whole foods. Cheating, if you want to call it that, isn't even appealing to me because of how ill it makes me feel. So it's a good and a bad thing, but really just fueling my body. Like food for me is enjoyable, but it's not what I center myself around. And again, just like the people who center their mindset around, oh, I got to look this way. It's like, I got to have the perfect diet. No, you don't. Like you want to eat to fuel yourself. And if you're super active, maybe you eat more carbs that day. If you're not super active, maybe it's more protein and fat. Maybe you have some days where you have extended periods of non-eating to give your digestive system a rest. And so I went from being very regimented to being more intuitive with what my body needed based on the results that I was getting. And same thing with my exercise. The one constant was, it changed from year to year based on where I was in my training and if I needed to lose more weight or retain the weight that I had, but it was very little cardio. And that's why I did track and field. Sprinting, I can do short bouts of high intensity activity, but any kind of repetition, I would do 15 minutes on the Stairmaster and I would come in the next day lighter and higher body fat. I mean, it was just my body does not like long duration cardio. So it was a lot of lifting, a lot of sprinting, and a lot of sleeping.
I wanted to mention this to anybody who's watching or listening, how important it is to consider what Chrissy just said related to her body doesn't necessarily respond to what would be a typical prescription of exercise or even nutrition to elicit a specific outcome. There is variables within everybody. So that's why the fad diets don't work. Intuitive eating should be the primary goal of all people, and the elimination of processed foods. In fact, I might have to have you back as a
Yes, please
guest
do.
for that. I'm actually almost done with a expose. I'm about 3,500 words with peer review referencing related to processed foods. I've been working on it for a period of time. I talked to Dr. B about it, and I think we should have a panel discussion on processed foods, especially considering that it is now becoming something that's at least politically relevant in the United States currently. That's really important. People have no idea how horrific processed foods really are. They're terrible. And seed
And
oils. I would just throw that in there.
you can't eat intuitively with processed foods. I mean,
No.
processed foods, the sugar and the salt, especially the combination, stimulate your hunger and wanting to eat more. So and I think that's where people go wrong is, okay, well, I'll eat my Weight Watchers, microwaved meals or whatever. You're getting no nutrition. And that's the thing I think a lot of people don't understand, not to go down a rabbit hole, but the body doesn't just need calories. It needs nutrition. And if you're not eating high density nutritious food, your body will continue to make you hungry. When I tried to be vegan, I was hungry all the time. Why? Because my body wanted me to eat meat, but I didn't eat meat. So I just kept eating more carbs and more fat, and it would never satiate me. And the first time, I'll never forget the first time, one of our first dates with my husband, he was like, he kept trying to get me to eat meat, but respecting the fact that I wanted to be a vegan. And I was like, well, maybe I'll try sushi or sashimi. And he took me to the sushi restaurant, and I probably ate several $100s worth of sashimi. My body was like, this is what I've been trying to get you to eat for 4 years. And so when we're hungry, but we're eating foods, it may be we're not eating the food that our body needs. And that's what's driving the hunger, because there's a certain nutrient that we're missing, and the body is not going to stop until it gets what it needs. So
That's right. And as an athlete, your body signals for those kinds of nutritional needs may present as craving. I just want to make another side note that at Bryan University, I taught 6 classes, and 2 classes that I taught. One was basic college nutrition, think it was College Nutrition 207. And then I taught nutrition for sports performance. And what's interesting is a lot of students would say, why are they two separate classes? And I said, because they're two separate disciplines. And you'll see once you go through the class, you'll understand that nutrition for sports performance is actually quite significantly different for just the general population. And what I always would tie in, whether you were an athlete or you were just somebody who just wanted to maintain a healthy physique or at least a healthy body in terms of nutrition usage, is that the understanding and the intuitive understanding of how you interacted with food types and food sources was more important than the calories and the macros and all of that. I call it a system of habit and attunement. That would be a nice segue question. What is a habit or a system of attunement that you use in your nutrition that has just been a huge game changer, other than, of course, eating the sashimi and getting in actually a protein? Other than that, what is something that you're like, man, why didn't I do this before? Hindsight being 2020 would have fixed faster.
Not eating meals every 2 to 4 hours like they tell bodybuilders to do. It wreaked havoc on my digestive system because it never got the chance to rest. It was constantly, and my digestive system is always stressed. And then to eat every 2 to 4 hours was just more and more and more stress. I would have told myself, stop. You don't need to eat that frequently. You won't lose muscle in 2 hours. You're fine. And, it's actually better training for your body, your blood sugar, all that stuff, to not constantly have these spikes and let your system digest a meal, go through its peristalsis, and then be ready, empty and ready for the next meal.
I'm very happy that you mentioned that, because it is difficult to get clients into the headspace where they're able to disassociate all of the myths or what we would call maybe the worst practices in fitness and nutrition. Social media, of course, makes this a lot harder, but there's also just websites too. There's op-eds, there's articles out there, and there are people who look fantastic who say, do this. My problem with that fundamentally is that's anecdotal. And when you look at anecdotal evidence, it's not necessarily relatable to an individual outside of the anecdote, because there are evaluations that are not the same. And it could be all kinds of factors. And we don't have to go down that rabbit hole, but we should probably one day. I wanted to make a comment about something. I've used you as an example for probably, 15 years or so, as it relates to femininity and strength. And let me be clear what I mean by that is that you have been able to push your body into its peak genetic potential. And not every woman should or could do that necessarily. But you did it in such a very unique way. And I tried it really hard. This is something that if I've been asked many times, if there was one thing that you could say to men or women about fitness, what would you say? And it's different. The way that I like to approach the ladies is that strength is more important than anything else. And that strength doesn't necessarily mean size. And there's a misunderstanding. Like I said, we're going to post some pictures so people can see that you are able to take your body to its ultimate feminine capacity while still having an incredible amount of definition and strength. I've always loved your deltoids, by the way. I think I told you that a few years ago. I'm like, if I could just get that separation in my medial deltoid that you have. The thing is that I guess what I'm looking for from you is an affirmation to women, which is that strength training is not as scary as it's made out to be. And it's absolutely necessary. Could you speak to that for just a moment to help these ladies understand how important it is, not necessarily to become a figure competitor, but to be strong physically?
Yeah. So one, I just want to dispel the myth, like you kind of mentioned it, that lifting heavy makes you big. Like if you post pictures, I look big in those photos, but if you put me next to a normal person, I'm like you. I'm tall, I'm lean. So I look physically in a photo big, but I'm not. I wore, I don't know, size 2, size 4 when I was competing. So I'm tiny, I'm compact. But so lifting heavy, I could squat at my best, I could squat 300 pounds. So clearly lifting, I mean, there are very few exceptions where women will lift heavy and get big, but for the most part, we don't have the right hormones, the right structure to do that. So that's not going to happen. But I see women who are lifting like the 1 and 3 pound weights. And I'm like, if you drink milk, your gallon of milk is 8 pounds. If you pick up your kid's way more than that. So strength is something that I think, because most people live in a city where, not like you and I out on property where we have to do a lot of manual labor, they're not required to use their strength. but when you need it, it's good to have it. And so whether that's, saving a kid, whether that's, picking up something heavy in your garden, whatever it is, having the strength to do what you need to do when it's required is super useful. And I found that true over and over again, living out more remotely in the country. But I think people just, I don't know what the fear is about it. It's not feminine. My mom took photos of me to work, and her doctor that she worked for was like, "Oh, she's taking steroids." And I was like, "I don't think you know my daughter. She hardly takes supplements. She's definitely not taking steroids." But the impression is that women who have muscles are not feminine, are more manly. And so I hate that perception because I think it's beautiful. And I think, we're not meant to be bodybuilders, but we're meant to be fit, athletic, lean, and we've turned into a society that is the opposite of that, and that doesn't encourage people to be healthy. And if they do, it's, go do cardio, which, to some degree is useful, but not as much as strength is. And especially as we get older, I'm older than you, that strength, building size, that is more and more difficult. So the earlier you can do it, I don't lift quite as often. I lift maybe a couple of times a week versus every day. And I've lost some strength, but I've still maintained a lot of my muscle because of how long I was consistent doing that strength training.
That sums it up nicely. You are correct that most women do not have the chemical makeup that allows them to gain mass and size at the level that they imagine that it would be. Most of my clients tend to be female. And I would say that there is a reasonable level of resistance in the beginning. I haven't taken a new client, and I think my newest client's 2 years old. Every client that I have has been with me since, it's usually within the last decade. My clients are the same clients that I've had forever and ever and ever. And like I said, the only reason I even took this new client 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, was because I happened to train her wife. What I was going to say is that when it comes to encouraging women to lift, I have often over the years used you as an example. I have a client that I see every Saturday. She's lovely. She's been with me for 6 years now. In fact, I'm going to have her on because she would tell the story better than I do. So I'm going to paraphrase a little bit. So she basically said, is around Thanksgiving in 2024, she says to me, I'm done fighting with you. She's like, Michael, I come on a call and you're like, this is precisely what we need to do. And here's why. And you rationalize it. You tell me scientifically why we're doing this. She's like, because then I don't do anything. And I just fight and fight and fight. She's like, so here's the deal. She's like, I'm going to promise you that from January, I'm going to do only what you say. And then let's see what happens. She got so shredded. The moment she stopped fucking around and she just followed the basic instructions, because I know her well. So I tailored everything precisely to her food, everything. You know what we did? We cut processed foods and we cut sugar. That was the first thing we did with nutrition. And when it came to strength training, she actually joined a gym because it's 5 minutes down the road. Soon as she started doing strength training, it was only a 3-time-a-week algorithm. All we were trying to do was elicit an adaptation, giving her a very positive stress signal. It was low. We're talking about 65, 75%. We're not even talking about anything intense at all. She went from something like 37% body fat to like 6% body fat. And here's the best part. She's been maintaining it. All right. Well, on the back of that, what is one piece of advice that you would not give anymore that you used to believe early in your career?
I tend to be cynical, but I'm also very optimistic, is that if I did things naturally, if I ate unprocessed foods, didn't do drugs, trained well, rested well, that I would be able to get to the top of this ladder without any hit to my physical, psychological, mental, endocrine system, immune system. Like, I thought I could do it all. And what I learned is, I think one of my mentors says it much better than this, but something to the effect of your health starts to go down as you go into high level competition, because you cannot push yourself. I don't have the option. If there's a competition Saturday, I can't say, you know what, I'm not ready. I can withdraw from the competition. But if I'm supposed to be at the world championships, it only happens once a year. So whether I'm ready or not, I got to show up with as best I can. And so you have to make compromises. You have to train when you don't want to. You may not get to rest when you want to. And so be careful what you wish for. If you set a goal, know what you have to give up. You have to give up fun sometimes. You have to give up resting sometimes. And, my immune system took a hit many times. My endocrine system took a hit I didn't have a cycle for 12 years while I was competing. And that's not great as a female long term to not have all of those hormonal fluctuations. I would say that, I'm all for whatever goal you want to go after, but just know what the consequences are and be ready to pay the price that, you have to, it's like you can do it more healthfully, but at some point your body, your hormones, something gives.
I think also there's the competitive nature. You're in a competition, and some people really thrive on that in their mind. That's thriving. But then the consequences, the bill is due, and you pay with post-adrenal fatigue syndrome. You pay with connective tissue problems. You pay with micro tears that suddenly that become macro tears, and all of a sudden, before you know it, you have epicondylitis, and suddenly you can't even curl 20 pounds when you're doing 45. The list goes on and on and on. There are consequences to that, and I think that people crash out. I know it's a new term. I'm going to use it now. I've been on social media more recently. People crash out hard, and they don't understand that the mind body connection. And I know that over the years you've spoken out pretty significantly about the chronic symptoms that derail people at their peak. And I know that happened to you. Would you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. The great thing about life is that it lets you learn lessons over and over again until you really master them. And so I have a hard time mastering knowing what my limits are. And so I take on too much and I go and I go and I go till I can't go anymore and I crash and I learn my lesson. I go to Hawaii, then I decide to compete and I go and I go and I go until I crash. So, I'm almost there, I think. But that's the good thing about life is that we get opportunities to continue learning. And that's really all that happened is that, I had a full-time job. I saw my clients. I was competing professionally. I was writing articles. I was doing podcasts. And at some point the body just goes, enough. I think I'm capable of doing more at a given time than I really should be because I'm a doer. I'm very driven. And so that's basically what happened is I just pushed myself over the edge one more time.
I'm just going to generalize here if you indulge me. Most people at your level at that point in time would double down with performance enhancement drugs, supplements, or some kind of extreme protocol. They would do something. But what I love about your journey is that you actually turned inward. You did something very different than most people do. You didn't seek something external. You went internal while still recognizing the external, which I think is so important. While you did take this big internal focus, you didn't ignore the external at the same time. And I don't think people are very good at doing that. And you seem to do that quite well. Is that a relatively accurate statement?
Yeah, it is. The last time I crashed from overdoing things was probably 4 years ago. My world was like turned upside down, all kinds of anaphylactic reactions, just I couldn't eat anything. It was literally my nervous system was just wigged out. And so I had to go inward and I chose to go inward because the medical industry was providing me. I did all kinds of tests and they all came out negative. We can't figure out what's going on. And if you look at like the word disease, it's dis-ease. I'm lacking ease. And if you look at a lot of, we even taught this one class at Bryan, which was mind body psychology. And it was how different personality types and different ways of thinking and moving through the world tend to cause certain chronic illness. And so, we can say, yes, there's no doubt in my mind, diet and working out either contribute to health or not. But there's a lot more going on. Your mental state contributes to health or not. People who are negative tend to get sick more often. People who have anger and other things tend to have more problems in their life. But not only that, that's mind body aspect that I addressed is all the emotions, the thinking, the perfectionism, because that's a form of stress. Like all of those things are stress. And when you look around, if you look at disease, it's literally too much stress. There's too much stress for your body to recover. And if you were to work out and not recover, you get rhabdomyolysis, right? Your muscles break down. If you stress and stress and stress and stress and you don't get to recover, whatever that stress is, you get some kind of output, which is called illness. So the other aspect, the other side of that mind body is what's going on neurologically and from a primitive, like we may be all fancy and have all this tech, but we are still primitive beings in some of our reactions to how we do things, like converging our eyes. That's taking your eyes inward, which we do on our phones when we're reading, when we're on the computer. We only do that in nature if we're a predator trying to kill something, or we are prey trying to make sure we see what's about to kill us. And so if we are converging our eyes all day long, what is that sending? That primitive message to our brain is we are under stress. Something in my environment is threatening. And so I had to take a look at everything in my life that was causing threats that I thought might not be threatening, right? You don't think being on my phone, maybe it's not the healthiest thing, but how's that threatening my body? Well, your brain interprets eye convergence very differently than how we think about it. Same thing with breathing. A lot of people mouth breathe, chest breathe, which again signals to your body you're under stress. When you're relaxed, you breathe through your nose, diaphragmatic breathing down towards your belly. But when we're stressed, we don't do that. And then again, another signal to the brain that we're stressed. So all the medical things weren't working. Even some of the, health things that I've done in the past weren't working. It wasn't until I addressed the mind, the emotions, and then the neurological side that my body, like with literally once I made all of those connections, it was 10 days and my body went back to functioning mostly normal after about 8 weeks of freaking out. And so it really reminded me, and this is not the first time it's happened. Like I started studying this stuff 20 years ago when I injured my back and no medical intervention was helping. And I finally looked at the stress component. I relieved the stress, back pain went away. And so it was just, again, life presenting another opportunity for me to relearn that stress is just as important to deal with as all the other components that we talk about when we're working with clients to help them get healthier, get to their goals.
That I really appreciate that you took the time to explain that, because it's very difficult for people to understand the somatic exercise of their body and their brain. The combination of the mind body effect. I've been saying this for years, is that body will follow the mind. And I know that's a slight divergence of what you were talking about. You're actually, I think you were speaking more in a general sense about being aware of how your body is perceiving stress, and then how you internally manifest a solution to address the stress. Call that the power of conscious response. But I've been a huge advocate of a somatic exercise approach. And what I've done over the years is I've actually, I guess you could say, extracted that and then broadened it to how I think about life in general. And just for those of you who don't know what somatic exercise is essentially neuromuscular facilitation at a conscious level. When you're absolutely thinking about every single movement of your muscle actions during an exercise. Arnold Schwarzenegger accidentally made this famous. I do believe that it was in his documentary, Pumping Iron, where somebody had asked him, what is the difference between you and all the other guys in the gym? How come you are so much bigger and doing so much better? And his response was very interesting. And I think this is what sparked it years ago. He said, when I'm lifting weights, I'm paraphrasing because it's completely, I'm giving you the spirit of what he said. I'm not quoting. He essentially said that when he lifts weights, he thinks about what's happening in his body. He thinks about the muscle. He thinks about how the tendons and the ligaments and the brain is interacting and the neurons that are firing. He considers each movement and he peaks it and he flexes and he makes sure that his concentric and his eccentric action is, for Jim speak, positives and negatives. His tempo is on point. And I believe that that is applicable in your daily life. You can somatically approach your life. I have a problem in general society, which is that there is an abdication of personal responsibility. I say this all the time. If anybody's listened to, even I can't get through one fucking podcast without saying that word. And the reason is because it's so true and it's prevalent. I have found that when people step back, like I was mentioning my client who said, Michael, I will do exactly what you tell me to do. And I promise I'll do it. As soon as she did it, she saw results. You get out of your own fucking way. That's, I think, is the problem, right? We have to get out of our own way, and connecting our brains to our bodies, I think, is an elevated state of consciousness. I know that sounds hippie to a lot of people, but frankly, if you haven't done it, you don't understand what you're missing. I can tell you right now that if you just go through the motions of your workout, it's suboptimal. I mean, you're going to get results, obviously, because there's a thermodynamic exchange, there's load, there's time under tension. Sure, right, okay. But if you want to be excellent, you have to employ your brain and your body together. I'm really glad that you talked about the eye divergence. This is a huge thing. I don't know how long I've been doing this. It's been maybe, it's been about 5 or 6 years at least that my phone is on D&D. I can't get phone calls. Well, that's not precise. I have 3 people, if they call me, will get through, but everyone else is blocked. I can't get a phone call from anybody for emergency reasons. I have, my mother, of course, and then Heather. But other than that, it's shut off. I do wear a watch, a fitness tracker watch that can do push notifications. That's off. I'm not wearing it right now, but like that's off. I don't engage with the technology at that level, at that micro level, because I do believe that it is a detractor in my life. I think that it actually causes stress, and this accumulation of stress where we're inward, like when I say inwardly focused, I'm not being inwardly focused on our own personal improvement. I'm talking about internally focused in this regard. Like, basically if you aren't watching, I'm holding a phone to my face. This limits your field of vision, predatory and prey. And I knew this. And to hear you say it in the way that you did was so much more eloquent than the way I make it way more complicated than you did. But I do believe that somatic exercise has really helped me, and I'll tell you why. I am not young anymore, not relatively, right? I have injuries. I have chronic epicondylitis in my right elbow. I have a torn labrum in my left shoulder. I have a partial meniscus tear in my left knee, and then I have the class 2 tendon tears in my bicep tendons. And they'll happen at the same time. You have to change everything about the way you approach your training algorithm to accommodate for these injuries. And I got really into the somatic exercise. Anyway, I didn't mean to diatribe, but I'm just curious whether you use that term or if you use that approach.
Well, I wasn't working out quite as much then just because my body was freaking out. But yes, like feeling what your body is doing. I mean, you talked about the power of the mind. Like you hear a noise and you think, okay, well, how you interpret that depends on what's going on in your body. If I think is breaking into my house, I'm releasing a lot of adrenaline to get me ready to fight or run the heck away from that person. If I think it's my dog that's going to get ready, trying to knock at my door and wants to snuggle up with me, I have a different hormonal response. Nothing changed in my outside world. It was all in here and what my interpretation is. And so just like what you said, if I'm in there just going through the motion, one, I'm probably not really focusing on the muscle that's actually supposed to be contracting. So maybe I'm using other muscles, but I'm not really getting the full benefit. It's like people who eat while they're watching TV. It's like they're not getting the full benefit of the food, the digestive process, because they're out here versus in here focusing on what's going on. And we have so many distractors all day long that and it's become normal. People are always on their phones, always on their devices, and I don't think people that realize that it actually causes stress. Not only does it not take you into your internal experience, it also blocks connection with other people, and we are social creatures. Even an introvert like me does not do as well if I am completely isolated from people that I love.
How did you kind of leverage this mindset of the internalization and understanding that you weren't necessarily alone, because you sought help, right? Whether it be about nutrition or your environment, whatnot. We just need people. Like sometimes that's just what we need. And I know that you had internalized a lot of these things, which is great. But I had said earlier that you still kept an external eye, right? You didn't narrow in predator or prey. And I love this. And I feel like people need to hear how you can still work on and be the best version of yourself, and recognize that you have flaws, or that you're hurting, or that there's a pain factor, but you can still be aware and cognizant of the world that's going on around you. So share with the audience how you manage that, and like what was an impactful moment for you from the external side, since you were starting to master the internal.
Well, what actually even got me to the internal was looking at all these podcasts of people who had all these symptoms that they couldn't explain, because this was the COVID era. And I got tested and it wasn't post COVID, because a lot of people had developed long-term symptoms that were not resolving after the fact, the post-viral, and people experience that with Epstein-Barr and all this kind of stuff. So I was just like, okay, there's got to be someone else. And so I found this woman, Rebecca, and I watched her video on YouTube, and she experienced a lot of the same things I have most of my life. Very similar to me, perfectionistic, people pleaser, internalizes a lot of stress. And I just reached out to her and I was just like, could what I be experiencing be just stress? And she was like, Absolutely. And so she and I had a conversation. She gave me inspiration. And I think that was I had connection to someone else who validated how I was feeling, but also said, you're not broken. Your body's just too stressed. And that was like, oh my gosh, I'm getting chills now even talking about it, because it was this huge burden that was lifted off of my shoulders. Because in society, we're shown we're broken, we're fragile, we're all of these things, which is why you have to take drugs. Don't do this, don't do that, because, we're these fragile creatures. And yes, compared to some species, we're not the most robust species, but we're pretty crafty and can handle a lot of stuff if we have the right support. So I had her as support. And I went on my journey doing all of the exercises I told you about to decrease stress neurologically and mentally. And it was amazing. I went on her podcast, talked to her about my recovery. And that's what got me through those hard times, was imagining myself recovered, imagining myself in prime health again, imagining myself on that podcast sharing my story of recovery with other people. Because I think all too often we get stuck in, well, I'm the only one going through this, or I'm different, I'm never going to get better. And sometimes we just need to get out of our own way and let our bodies heal, let our bodies decompress, and our bodies know how to take care of ourselves. We just have to get our minds and our ideas about what we should do out of the way, and just give us that space to just be and let our body take over. Because our body is replicating cells, eliminating cells as we speak right now, and we're not even thinking about it. So I'm pretty sure it's a little bit more smarter than we are.
First of all, it shows a level of self-awareness and maturity on your part to be able to recognize that you did need a little bit of external help while still focusing on your internal processes. And that's the thing too. I just want to reiterate that I don't believe that internalizing and considering your own personal state is bad. It's not selfish. It's not narcissistic. None of these buzzwords that social media loves to use. None of that is wrong. What's wrong is not doing it. Because you can't help anybody if you're a wreck, if you're broken. You can't help anybody if you're incapable of seeing things from, at least, I don't like the word sympathy, but at least from an empathetic standpoint, you should be able to look at somebody and say, I can see that they're suffering here. And I think that I might have some ideas that will help you ease that suffering. I believe that that's one of the travesties, the lost travesties of the modern era, is the lack of community. And I don't think social media is an adequate supplement to real human connection, and not in the way that I'm discussing. And I mean this in whether you're religious or not, or you're inclined towards certain, I don't know, events, whether it be sports or whatever. I don't care. I'm just saying that there is a lot that has to do with camaraderie. And you had said something earlier that I just wanted to remind everybody of, is that if you hang around bums, you become a bum. You kind of do. And that's known. But I find that really inspiring that a coach sought a coach. If I were in a situation where I didn't feel I was getting results in my training algorithm that I write for myself, I would absolutely reach out to a colleague. I'd reach out to you, Dr. B, Rex Owens, John Bauer. Dr. B, obviously, many times, years and years ago, I brought him my training algorithm, and he looked at it, and he looked at me, and he said, "So you're setting yourself up to fail? I'm not understanding what this is about."
That's something he would say.
Yeah, well, what it was is I was being ridiculous. It was an experiment. I'll make this a really brief story. Dr. B is one of the people that I'll always go to if I really need, without trepidation, the truth, and I want it to be fed to me in a fire hose. That's where I will typically go. In fact, I miss his companionship. Actually, I think about him all the time. But I had brought him my training algorithm. This is maybe 2011, maybe 2010. I don't remember. I was trying to hypertrophy, but my nutrition was all out of whack, because what I was trying to do as an experiment is I was trying to maintain single digit body fat while increasing lean muscle. But I appreciated that. Now, but in your tongue in cheek aside, back to the crux of this, which is that even coaches need coaches sometimes, and somebody who is educated, professional, precise, and accomplished as you still is going to trip. And you're smart enough to reach out and grab somebody before you fall. And maybe in your mind, I would suspect, and this is a projection, I guess, but maybe you did stumble a little bit and you scraped your knees. But I've never seen you actually fall from my position. You've always been somebody whose momentum has carried her, even though she has not necessarily been sprinting. and sometimes crawling. What is important that I want the audience to understand is that you never, ever give up. You always are looking for solutions, and you're very good at taking your world championships and putting them aside and saying, I need help. And I feel like that is probably one of the most amazing things that a professional, paid professional coach can do, is say, I need help. And taking that experience and then packaging it in such a way where they are able to inspire their own clients, and or at least their sphere of influence. Because I know you're not actively coaching right now. I know you're so involved in higher education right now with Brown University and everything there. But as a matter of fact, let's segue there. Now that you're so involved, I have one quick question. This is a kind of a funny one. Yeah. Do you feel like over the years, with all of these experiences, the positives and the negatives, and I'm just curious if you can quantify how your approach to helping people change has changed over the years?
Yeah. So, I mean, I would say I always wanted people to find what was useful for them or important to them. I don't define your goals, you define your goals, what's important to you. But I've really shifted a lot of my focus on what makes you happy, makes you want to get out of bed in the morning. Because like we talked about earlier, you can reach your fitness goals, you can reach your physique goals, and you can still be miserable. And so it's really about helping people find balance in their life so that they prioritize space for fun and for connection just as much as they prioritize their diet or their getting to the gym or whatever they do for fitness. And I have some friends that do not like working out. They're like, I don't walking, whatever, gardening, I don't like any of it. Cause I was like, what hobby do you like? Anything? No, I don't like moving. And I'm like, well, I mean, you can go that route, but it's not gonna look pretty down the road. And so one of my coworkers reached out to me recently and was like, I joined a yoga studio. She's like, I love it. And to hear her excited about moving, I was like, this is a miracle. And, but it was like, you could tell, like she is, despite the stress at work, she is different. Like she has this glow about her because she has found something that she's able to move our bodies, and our bodies are meant to move. It doesn't matter what it is. Our bodies are, you don't use your car. Guess what? It breaks down. You don't use your body. Guess what? It breaks down. It's not optional not to move if you want your body to work well, but finding something that elicits joy is more of my approach now, because similar to your client that wasn't listening to you, it's like if you don't want to do what I say and you do nothing, you're going to get no results. So if you're not going to do it, tell me and I'll find something that you will do, right? Because the best exercise is the one you're going to do.
Exactly,
the one that
right.
Makes you happy and that you're going to do. And I have some clients who will suck it up and they'll hate the exercise program, but they'll be like, I know this is going to get me my results, and my results are more important than me hating doing the exercise. And then I have other clients that are, I'm not going to do it. Well, then let's find something that you will do, because my job is to help you get to your goal. And if you're not going to do it this way, then let's find a way you will do it.
Clients always have contention points, right? Points of struggle. And I have a saying, it's actually in my book, The 90-Day Habit Transformation, shameless plug. I always say that we don't have a fitness or nutrition problem, we have an attitude problem. Really, if you can check your fucking attitude, fitness and nutrition isn't that hard. It really isn't. I mean, we can make it hard. We can complicate it. We can go on social media or go to Reddit or Discord, and boy, yeah, you can overcomplicate everything. But if you really want results, you just got to get your mindset right. But I'm curious, with your experience, what did you find that most clients struggled with? Was it more fitness? Like, was it their workout structure? Was it the reality of nutrition as it relates to whole food, healthy eating? Was it mindset? Was it the fact that they were resistant to or overemphasized recovery? What did you find was the biggest issue in your heyday of coaching that you had to contend with?
I would say, all of those things obviously contribute to the end result. But I would say it's a mismatch of our biological needs and circadian rhythms. People are plugged in so much that they can't sleep. Then that affects their mood, their desire for crappy food, their ability to get to the gym. And there's really it's funny, you were talking about alone. My husband did lots of wilderness trips with his clients, and you would have so much fun talking to him about that. But they would actually go through withdrawal. They had to do a 3-day period where they would just go. And this was like early thousands before all of the, cell phones and constant being plugged in. And people still needed that transition because they would literally freak out going, and they were in groups. So it's not like they were by themselves, but just not being attached to the stress. We're almost addicted to the stress that we have every day. And we feel like something is missing, or we're detached, or we're hanging by a string. If we don't have our phone, we don't have all these things. I know many people that could not do what you do and put your phone on do not disturb and have your notifications off because they have to know instantly when something happens. Right. And so, but that has a cascade effect then to everything else if we can't let our nervous systems just be. Just watch a sunset, watch the birds flying in the air. People don't do that unless it's on a TV or on a TikTok video or something.
I don't think people understand the power of the last two sentences that you just said. If you just sit back and you watch nature for just a few minutes, it's grounding. I've always said that I don't care if you're religious or spiritual or whatever. If you go to Yosemite National Park and you don't have your cell phone with you and you walk that valley at any time of the year, especially the high water season, let's say late June, early July, when all the snow is melting and the waterfalls are just flowing like crazy, there's no way that any rational, sane human being can't stand in the middle of the Yosemite Valley, look around and say, life is way better and bigger than I ever imagined. It is a cleanse. It's a cleanse for your soul. I'm telling people all the time, get outside. You know this because I know you follow me on Instagram, but I don't post a lot. But when I do, it's usually nature. I'm sharing an experience of detachment. Yes, I know. I understand that sounds hypocritical because I got a cell phone in my hand and there's the whole thing. But that's not the point. The point is that I will sit outside and I will go in, grab my phone and come out when I see something that I just feel like, could this add value to people's lives and give them a sense of just reconnecting with the earth? We are part of this earth. We are beings, and we have an insane intellect comparatively to the rest of the animals. But what I find fascinating is when you take a moment, you sit back and you watch the world around you, especially if you have even a little bit of land, go to a park even, and you just observe and you digest it. There is something cleansing. And I believe that cleanse is the disassociation of manufactured stress. It's the fake stress that we create for ourselves and that we use as an excuse to not be optimized. There's nothing better. I encourage everybody who's listening or watching, please just go to a national park and leave your phone in the cabin or in the tent or wherever, and just go and literally feel what the world is like. It changes everything. And I know what we're talking about. We're talking about a lot of the higher end conscientiousness. And I think that a lot of people they find that boring. And I find that's boring. I find that kind of excuse boring. I find people's excuses fucking boring. Everybody has a reason that they can't be excellent, and it's never their fault. That's absurd. You absolutely can be excellent. And you want to know what makes you more excellent is being part of this world. There's nothing better. I'll sit out on a Saturday night with a glass of wine with Heather, and we have over 50,000 lights on our property. Yeah. Well, and I'm talking about each individual diode, though, so to be fair. So it's not like 50,000 bulbs. It's little diodes for LEDs. But we have a very well lit and beautiful, and we have acres and acres, and it's absolutely just a place where almost every night, no matter how stressful, Forge is a very stressful. Everything that I do professionally is extraordinarily stressful. And you know this because you know exactly how it is. Almost 90% of what I do is just criticized. People don't like maybe my mustache wasn't trimmed enough. In fact, we have a Facebook comment where somebody is bitching at me because they don't like the way that my beard is trimmed. Everybody tells me to cut my hair. Well, they can fuck straight off. And so
I'm jealous of your hair. If I had your hair, I wouldn't cut it either.
Well, but you know what it is, and you've known me since you know me since I was like fucking child. You know me for almost 2027. You and I have known each other for 20 years. So it's not that far away. It's 2 years from now. And when you and I first met, I had reddish blonde hair. And now it's definitely not that color. It's definitely silver. But we know we're aging, but we're aging gracefully.
Yeah, I agree.
Dr. B hasn't changed at all. He looks exactly the fucking same 20 years ago as he does today. Like the guy doesn't, he's just the same. Not one more wrinkle, nothing. Just He's immortal, I bet. I'm going to bet that he's a Highlander. He's some kind of weird, like you can only kill him by cutting his head off. There's some weird thing about that guy. But anyway, what I was saying is to be, I guess I want to be genuine about this, is that sometimes when you just sit back and, it's the dusk is coming and there's a perfect sunset and you have 13 deer in your yard and all of them by name and they know you and they're comfortable and, you live in a place where you've worked hard to build it up and you just sit down and you disassociate that stress and you just let it allow it to go. You allow it to exercise your body. You just, or exercise. I think I meant to say exercise. And you breathe. That's something, Chrissy, that you've mentioned often is breath. And I don't think people really truly appreciate how extraordinary that simple action of controlling breath is to mitigate stress, to realign your senses, to neutralize your nervous system overstimulation. Sometimes taking a break and that's why they tell you to take deep breaths when you're stressed out. There's a reason oxygenating the blood, thinking about the sympathetic nervous system is activated. It's no longer parasympathetic and you have to be conscientious about it. These things really matter. And everyone's so dismissive of the simple things. You know why? Because everybody's looking for the trick, the gimmick. Everybody's waiting for that one thing, that one hack. But that's not how it works. What does work is working to be the best that you can be, as you've done, working to overcome the obstacles and challenges that present themselves to you, which you've done, finding modalities and means to continue your journey in a proactive and positive way without an unnecessary excessive amount of regret, which you've done. You're a success story in so many different ways. And I've always had a deep admiration for you and a lot of the people that I've worked with over the years, because I've seen, I've known you long enough to have watched you go through things and I've seen fluctuations and I'm observant, but not judgmental. I make assessments, not judgments. And that's one of the reasons that I really wanted to talk to you today, because I felt that your story is so cool and that so many people need to hear it. You have a unique perspective on life, but you're also very realistic about it. You're like, look, this sucked, but here's what we do to get over it. And I think that we don't get enough of that nowadays, because I think that everybody over coddles or they underemphasize. I'm going to put this out there. I really think that we need to have you on because we have to do a conversation about processed foods and food sources. So we should schedule that. But in the interest of time, and I just want to be respectful of you and all that stuff. But I have a couple, maybe some fun rapid fire questions that we can end with just for fun and maybe add some levity.
Okay.
What in your experience in education, let's say in the Sacramento campus for Brian, was the craziest fucking shit that you ever had to deal with? Just something you're like, this isn't really happening right now.
With students?
Could be anything. Yeah, but students are usually funnier because, they're students.
I had a student who told me he did not do his assignment because he got arrested and was in jail. And it was a lie. He never got arrested, but that was the excuse he used as to why he couldn't do his homework. And I was like, there are so many other excuses you could have used that would have not made you look bad, but you chose that you got arrested and went to jail. Okay.
That is the best. I actually have some pretty funny stories from Brian. I really do. But this isn't about me. This episode's about you. I'll have to tell you about them later. But I had some really interesting ones. Okay. I have one, myths. You know me, I can't stand social media. So, I have to talk. What is one thing you see on social media that every time you see it, it like almost makes you, like you get an emotional response in a bad way. Like you're like, oh my God, stop fucking saying that.
Oh, that's a good one.
There's so many.
Pretty much anything. Like, honestly, I scrolled, like the only reason I'm on Instagram is to look at puppy videos or crystals. Like I see fitness things and it doesn't matter what it is. It's like this tool will, like help you lose fat or whatever. It's just, I can't take it. And all the influencers, I can't do it.
I hate to say it. The Forge Instagram is growing. We're adding probably 20 to 30 followers a day. I don't know how that's happening, but, I don't actually have any desire to be a social media influencer. The only reason that I have social media is because we have gotten emails from people saying, hey, I was on your website. This looks so amazing. I want to sign up, but I went to your Instagram and I noticed that you don't have enough followers. So I wanted to make sure this is a real company. That's what I'm relegated to. So I'm forced, and if I want to continue operating in this modern world, I have to have a social media presence. But anybody who's talked to me for more than 5 minutes knows that I have no interest whatsoever in actually doing it. But I have been creating content. And what makes me laugh, and I'm not upset about this at all because these people can fuck off, but every single comment is negative. Everybody's so negative. People get off my feed and I'm like, I didn't put myself there. I just posted and it just showed up. People, they almost always, it's usually an ad hominem. They'll go after my physical appearance typically. Somebody said I'm 30% body fat. Where did you see 30% on my body? So it's just dumb stuff like that I have to contend with. But you know what? I'm doing it. And here's why, because I believe that I'm saying this with humility. I'm doing fitness and nutrition and habit coaching the right way. I'm doing it based on the individual need. What do you need? And I'm not here to sell templated programs. I'm not here to sell you fucking keto pills or whatever. I'm not here to sell fads. I'm here to sell truth. And if you don't like it and you're going to make shitty comments, I'll take it. Fine. Okay. Let me do two more.
But I will say that I do follow. So I'll add to my puppies crystals. I'll add that there are some fitness people who are putting out content that have specific, it's not hype. It's not a supplement. It's here's a drill that will help you with this. Here's a drill that will help you with that. And they're very quick drills, but I'm like, that's a good thing, whether it's vision, whether it's a stretch, whether it's whatever, it's like, that's useful. To me, those things are gems because like you said, sometimes it's not this huge thing. It's just one little thing that you're like, that's it. That's what's missing from my equation, from my algorithm as you use of my program. And so those are useful for me to go through. Anything that's hype, scroll right on by.
Yeah. I just, as a note of encouragement to you, I know I'm not saying that you should or that you want to, but if you go back and you look at some of your old YouTube demonstration videos, the world needs those. I think you do a really, really good job of demonstrating certain movement actions. And in fact, I will admit openly and with high praise that I have used your videos to explain to clients how to do certain things. For example, you did a great video on the back squat. And then these are old videos. I think it's 2018 or even earlier, but I've used some of your videos.
I haven't posted in 10 years, so it was earlier.
Yeah. Maybe it's 2009 or some shit. I don't know. It was a long time ago. I don't even think they're HD. Like,
probably not.
They're like 480p. I did want to ask you. I have two more fun things, and then I'll let you go. And here's one. What is your favorite exercise? Like,
that's hard because in the past I would have said squats. I love squatting. I'm not really built to squat at heavy weight because I'm tall. But I really like that. Now it's anything I get to do that's outside.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah. So right now my most fun thing is I go rock hunting and I dig in the dirt with my axe. And it is such a workout. I love it. I swing the axe hundreds and hundreds of times. And I'm like, this is so much fun. And it's like, it's not a workout. So I love it.
It's funny you mentioned that. We don't have a lot of rocks. In fact, where we live here in Texas, this used to be an old lake bed prehistorically. So the rocks are weird. It's more clay and sand. However, you know what I'm kind of thinking about doing? And I'm not committing to this. I'm just saying I'm thinking about it. I have like 72 trees on our properties, and most of them are big ass oak trees. I'm thinking about getting a slack line. Thinking about it. And of course, I'll post something about that. But I'm thinking about they're cheap. But here's the problem. The issue is, I get too big for my britches. So, if I buy it, it'll get it here and I'll load it up, and then, it's 105 degrees in Texas right now.
Oh yeah.
Do I really want to go there, sweat balls on a slack line? I don't know. But I would say so back squat was yours. Mine's always been deadlift. And, you've seen me in real life. So, I think I'm an inch taller than you. But because you and I are almost equal height. Yep. But the deadlift was my favorite. And I have really a weird, what would you say, limb proportion. So I have like ape arms. They're super freaking long. And and I have a kind of a shorter torso and I have long ass legs. So I don't love the squat as much. But the deadlift, I can easily pull 405 pounds in set. And people are always surprised to see me do it. They're like, how are you doing that? And you know what the answer is? grit and determination, because it's harder now than it ever been. Like I think I do cap out. Maybe I'll get 4 or 5 reps of 405 on a deadlift. I'm comfortable 285, 305. That's kind of my comfort zone. In fact, maybe I'll set it up and show people one day. But me, I'm never out there to be bombastic. I guess okay. So maybe we'll just do like a little bit of an outro here for you too, because it's been so awesome. Thank you so much. But you are for the audience, in my estimation, you are what feminine strength looks like, and not just physically, but from a professional standpoint. And because, by the way, for those of you who don't know, Chrissy used to be my boss. So it's I've seen you in so many different facets. I've seen you personally, professionally, and I just think that it's really important to highlight and illustrate how incredibly strong you are in so many different ways, despite areas in your life where you've been, you've had some struggle, but you never give up. You always crawl through, and I just find that so cool. From the inside to the outside, you're always looking for ways to improve yourself. But moreover, you are a servant of people. And I find that to be just fantastic with your students, with your coaching clients, no matter what it is, even with colleagues and friends, people like me, you're always willing to teach, give feedback, constructive or whatever it may be. And so for those who are listening and they want to connect with you, or maybe find something out a little bit more about you, or anything, where can they find you? Is there any place that I know you're not into social media and all that stuff, but like, where can people learn more?
Just kidding. A smoke signal? I don't know. You can look me up on Facebook. I'm on my name on Facebook, on Instagram. I'm not there. I try not to spend a lot of time there, but people have reached out to me after they heard some of my stories, some of the other podcasts I did, and I'm always willing to answer questions or encourage people, or occasionally do some consulting stuff, because I've been blessed to have people in my life that helped me get out of some very difficult situations that derailed my body, mind, whatever. And, for me to be able to give back, that's really what I aspire to do, is like whatever interaction I have, I want to leave people feeling more empowered, more inspired, and feeling like they can do it. Because like you said, a lot of people don't feel like they don't want to take responsibility. No, take responsibility and build the best freaking life you can. And if I can be part of that, I mean, I just had a client release her first book. I have clients now who are coaches themselves. And to me, nothing is more like of an honor, because I got to be part of their journey, and then they're paying it forward, and the community is spreading. So like that's the biggest compliment anyone can do, is just to take what they've learned, build upon it, and go teach other people. So if I can help, reach out to me. And I'd be happy to.
Awesome. All right, my dear. Well, it's always, as usual, fantastic to see you. And for those of you who are out there and this story resonates with you, just remember, just be like Chrissy. Stay strong, stay honest, and remake yourself every single day. Simple as that.